podcast. I'm your host, Josh Powers, and with me is TutorUp CEO and co-founder Ray Cap.
Hi.
Today we have a special guest, Michelle McDonald. Michelle, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about your background.
Yes, so Michelle McDonald. I am an elementary K through 6 licensed teacher here in the state of Tennessee. I kind of entered into the teaching profession a little bit late in life. I figured out at the age of 40 what I really wanted to be, so I went back to school and got my master's in teaching. And then I spent several years teaching in the Williamson County school system, teaching elementary school. I am no longer teaching in an elementary school, but I do spend time tutoring. I also have homeschooled my sons, and so I love every element there is about education and learning.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we are honored to have you. She's actually a tutor with us as well, working with a lot of our younger students, K through about 8th grade, and as well as some ACT, SAT, which we will hit more on. So right now, this is the beginning of September. This will probably release in the next week or two. So one of the things that we are talking about is what's one thing that all K through 12 students have in common. Well, for the first couple of weeks is establishing a routine. So wake up times going from summer to now the school year is going to be different. Maybe some bedtimes, especially for younger kids, but also some high schoolers. And then finding a right balance of academia, extracurriculars, sports, music, whatever that is, and then also ending the day with some family time. Ray or Michelle, is there anything that you would want to say on that, and why that is so foundational?
Well, all three of us are parents, and so we've all been through this routine, and I think it's really important to establish a cadence for the day. My wife was a special ed teacher for 26 years, and I didn't know anything about being a dad, but she seemed to have a good natural instinct about the whole thing. And for example, when we would go do something that was off schedule, not part of the routine, she'd sit down the kids or, buckle them in, and then in the car explain to them, now we're going to go to grandma's house, then we're going to go eat, and then we're going to go fishing, and then we're going to, whatever it was, she laid it out for them so that they understood what was happening. And kids are so often out of control, meaning not that they're crazy, but that they're not in control of the schedule.
Yeah.
Yes.
And parents know what's going on and assume the kids do. So that was one thing I learned from being a parent. It actually worked out pretty well.
Yeah. Now, have you ever seen from the classroom side where maybe you feel that the students' balance is quite there? Maybe there's too much emphasis on something other than school.
Oh yes, the county that I taught in is one that has a great deal of extracurricular activities and a lot of just sports and different things that you can do in the community. So a lot of my students were involved in that kind of thing, and it did affect their homework time. It affected their study time. So I would try as a teacher to work with the parents about, understandably, this is what I expect that student to be able to do or to bring their homework in. And they were good as parents to try to balance that too, but it does get a little bit out of control sometimes. I would see students overly tired, or it gives them anxiety when they come in and they know they didn't have time to do something because they were at a late night hockey game or something.
Right.
So, but I love what you said, Ray, about just setting those expectations, because I think as an adult, I would not want someone to just put me into a car. I mean, I might love that person and trust that person, but I want to know where we're going. I want to know how long we're going to be gone, what's going to happen. And I think kids are the same way, that if you can just set the expectations. As a classroom teacher, that's what I did. Definitely at the beginning of the year, but all throughout the year of here's what we're going to do this week, here's what we're going to do today, here's what I'm expecting you guys to do by the end of the week. And that helps anyone of any age, whether it's kindergarten and first grade up through a senior in high school, to know the expectation, be able to handle that.
Michelle, you're so smart to bring that up. I was a scoutmaster for the same number of years. My wife was an elementary school teacher, and we had a great troop, and five of the kids in the last year went to Ivy League schools. Well, one of the things I did as Scoutmaster was to say, I don't know if you guys know Tom Bodette of Motel 6.
Yeah.
So, he's famous for his tagline, "We'll keep the light on for you." And we had a kid that was the All-American in lacrosse, and we had a kid that was #1 in debate in the state, and we had a kid that was on the swim team, and we had a kid that went to Yale who was the fastest runner in the state. Would probably outdo you, Josh. and one of the things I would tell him is, look, I'm here for you from the time you're 7 till you're 18.
Right.
And you go be the fastest runner in the state during this 13-week period. Come to a couple meetings, go on a camp out or two, just have fun with this, and it'll all work out. And I think everybody's just got to chill and kind of respect the stress we put on children is just unbelievable.
Yeah.
And especially more today. When I grew up, all we played was football.
Yeah.
It's
so much more
we didn't even have a little league in our town. Well, I grew up in Canton, Ohio, where, the home of professional football. So we had football, and that was it.
Right.
And kids have a myriad they have a smorgasbord of choices now. So we just have to be careful about not adding stress by trying at the same time to pad their resumes to get them into college, right?
Right.
Absolutely.
It's so stressful.
Right, and I think from a parent side is putting forth expectations that are realistic. Not saying you can't go after huge goals, but not at the expense of other things. I remember there was a student who I worked with in Texas, and his parent, I never will forget it because he was in 5th grade and just naturally a big kid. I guess he was pretty good at football, and we were talking about preparing for some reading benchmark, and basically his dad told me that he didn't have time for that and he was going to focus on football because one day his son was going to be a Texas Longhorn. And I just saw Texas Longhorns play on Saturday, and he was not on the roster. He would be in college now. And so, with that being said, we don't want to put such a heavy burden on one and not the other. So what I think the main takeaway that we're encouraging parents is to just find that right balance. Make sure that the extracurriculars are in that priority list behind the academics, because the academics are what are gonna put them forward. And so, Michelle, if you wouldn't mind maybe just talking a little bit about the school district that you were a part of. So for those of you who do not know, we are located in Nashville in Tennessee, and she was a teacher in Williamson County, which is one of the more prestigious counties. And so if you could maybe just talk a little bit about your experience from a teacher's perspective.
Okay. Yes, Williamson County, very prestigious in the state. Several of our schools in Williamson County were top ranked in the state, and I would hear from parents a lot that they would move into our county so that they could get their kids into our schools, because our schools were ranked just as successfully as a lot of the private schools. So they would save money by sending them to the public school that had a good reputation. That came with a lot of trade-offs, because it was also, just speaking from a teacher's point of view, there was a lot of pressure on performance, student performance, test scores, the standardized test at the end of the year, making sure our students were where they needed to be. So on the one hand, it's nice because students would get individual help as we could give that, because we wanted every child to succeed, every child to progress. But on the other hand, it puts a lot of stress on teachers. I think that there's a lot of pressure. I mean, we're always told don't teach to the test, but at the same time, you've got a lot riding on that test. And you know that if you can get your students just to cover these things that are needed to score well, then they'll please their parents, they'll please the administration, they'll please the teacher, and the teacher will be pleased with our scores. And so there's just, it does give a little bit more pressure, I think. But you also, the exchange of that is you do have a lot of parents who want the very best for their children, to the point that they've even moved into the county, or they've done everything they can to get them in those schools. So very, very active parent participation. I taught for a semester in Metro Davidson County, and it was very different. You've got just a different demographic of people, and we didn't have very much parent participation. In our county, we had a lot. So it was kind of nice that I could reach out to parents and say, I noticed he struggled a little bit today, so I'm sending him home with a little bit of extra, if you can just do these 2 or 3 problems, see if he still understands it 3 hours later, that they would often do that. They would jump in and take care of that. But then the other trade-off, like we were just talking about, is also all the extracurriculars, because it does offer a lot of that. So I did see a lot of parents concerned about college in 4th grade, which at the time in 4th grade, they should just be worried about, mastering math facts and getting long division and, all those things. There's a huge gap. 3rd to 4th grade is a big jump into their understanding of reading and understanding of writing and what they can do with it then. So we're tackling that, and at the same time, they're worried that, can they get into college on football, or can they get into college on dance, or, are they the very best of the best? Are they at the top of the reading group? And to me, I don't care if they're at the top. I just want to make sure they're higher when they leave. If they're at the top, bottom, middle, I just want to make sure they've gone up before they leave. So it was a big mix. It was kind of a mix of things there, but a very, very good school system to work in. Very interesting.
It's interesting that you bring that up about Williamson County parents wanting the best for their child. In our experience as tutoring company people, we've discovered that parents like that are very open to tutoring because, the parent notices what's going on, the classroom teacher notices what's going on, and there is this basic itch to help the kid be what he or she can be.
Yeah.
And so that opens the door to supplemental help, whether it's, an established tutoring program or doing more homeworks or reading out loud, before you go to bed or whatever it is. Those parents want to help, and oftentimes it's the classroom teacher who can help them get in touch with what is needed.
Can jump in.
They can't necessarily be that supplemental help, but they can identify the need, and a parent like that can take it from there.
Right. It just takes that one little extra help. I had some personal family friends of mine about 2 weeks ago, and they homeschooled their child, and he's in middle school math, and he had done well. He definitely a math brain thinker, and he had done well up until this one topic. He just got stuck. He got stuck, and the mom tried to help him, the dad tried to help him, and we all know as parents that you're sitting at that table and the frustration comes in and the tears start to flow, and it's like, you don't know what's going to flip that switch, and so she asked me about it. I'm like, just let me come over, for a couple hours, let me just sit with him. And I didn't even see the issue, because it's getting that different person with a different approach to it, maybe a different approach. I took him backward a couple of steps and we worked forward from there, and then he just went smoothly into it. But I think it's just getting that extra person who maybe knows a couple of strategies, a couple of techniques, who might be able to kind of see why they got stuck, what their thinking was. We see it so much as teachers that we've seen so many students struggle with so many problems, and we might just know, that flip that switch. I know why you said that wrong answer, but look at it this way. And they're like, oh, okay.
You do, because you're an experienced classroom teacher, which is why in our company all our tutors are classroom teachers. Why? Because they know how to teach. They know where to meet the kid where he or she is. They know how to lead them through the progression.
Yes.
And it's really important that parents jump on this, because if whatever that kid got stuck in, next week they're going to build on that.
Right, they have to build on it to move forward.
And if that foundation isn't in place, or each step along the way, the child develops feelings of, wow, I can't get this.
I didn't get it.
And when you get into that mode, then you're in a hole.
And you get to the discouragement. I mean, because they did have frustration. They did, it got to a point of tears. And I've been there with my kids. But to have that other person step in with a fresh look and a fresh outlook on it, it builds their confidence. It's somebody new sitting down saying, look, you did it. You did it on your own. Try another one. Let's try another one. And, and make them an active part of it. And so by the time I left, he had confidence in it again. And so you just don't want them to lose that. We can always practice math. We can always practice reading. We can always practice science. But if you lose that confidence, then you're going to dig a hole that's a little bit harder to get out of.
Yeah. It's funny, there was one time where I was working with a 7th grader, and the parents were just really stuck. They understood how to do the math, they were doing some word problems, and they were coming in and they just were not understanding it. So then we worked with them, just did a couple of things, explained it to it maybe in a slightly different way, or had them read a certain section, underline things that they thought were important, maybe some keywords, and the student did really well. They had the test the next day, did excellent. The parents came back and they requested a meeting, And I, of course, thought it was a bad result, and so they did well. And the question was, well, what did you do? What did you say?
Yeah.
And, you know, it was funny, and I said, well, how did you explain this to them? And their method was very similar to what we had done. It was like, well, you know, highlight key phrases, make sure you understand it, maybe you can tell me what you think that it's asking you, and the kid were doing okay with it. And I said, well, we did the exact same thing. And what was different is that we just weren't you. And I think that sometimes is a big part of it, is because we're, as parents, I wouldn't say nagging kids, but we're constantly asking, you know, hey, clean up your room, make your bed, did you eat breakfast? And so when we ask the same questions regarding homework, well, did you highlight this? Or don't make this mistake when you're doing math. But a new tutor wouldn't say that. They would come at it with a much more patient hand. And so right away, this doesn't seem like, oh, mom or dad's getting on me. This is, oh, this is a new tutor, and this is someone who is clearly experienced. They're teaching, or they do this for a living, or they were a retired teacher. I think all of that plays into the big kind of mindset of, well, tutoring really can help me. And so, you know, the other side we would want to talk about is a little bit about how at TutorUp, how we partner with parents. Ray, if you can just maybe talk a little bit more about that.
Well, the parent is the first person that communicates with us about whatever the problem is. And, you know, they may say, I'm a nag, or, you know, and the problem with that is it builds a negative feeling about learning. Right? The kid's like, you know, I don't want to. But when Michelle is on that screen giving one-on-one 100, you know, because mom's cooking dinner and she's got a baby in her arm and making spaghetti and, you know, yelling at the kid about go do your homework and underline, you know, it's a negative feeling. The kid feels almost punished with his highlighter. But when Michelle comes with her smile and says, hey, you know, let's look at this, you know, and it might be somebody like Michelle is very likely to discover that it may not be topic related. It may not be math facts that are the problem. It may be that, you know, he's in 6th grade and the girl 2 steps over has got his attention instead, or she thinks the teacher doesn't like her. Those things really come into it. So when they become exposed to a thoughtful person who's got a methodology around taking them to a better place, smiles, says, oh, you know, what did you do at school today? You know, and smiles when she does it. It's a different experience, and the kid warms to that, and he or she, usually she, can lead them to a better place. But the parent is the key to it, because the parent's the one that calls us, or, you know, does a internet search at 2 a.m. after the parent-teacher conference, and she's all freaked out because she's worried her kid's going to be, you know, a bum his whole life because he can't do long division in 5th grade, and she's worried, and that worry communicates to the kid at a very subliminal and detrimental to education level. She's concerned. That's the positive thing. He's picking up, you know, this fright, this anxiety, and that's just no good. So somebody clean, fresh, new can help, and it can help that parent too. You know, we do a fair amount of feedback with the parent, and what we find is the kid's okay. The parent needs to do a little adjusting too. And you know, somebody that actually who they bring into that confidence that they have, they'll listen to that person just the same as the kid's going to listen to that other person.
I love just the whole idea of a lot of feedback. I mean, when I was teaching, whether it was, you know, 1st graders at 6 years old to, you know, 4th graders 10 years old, every afternoon, what was on my checklist of things I did after the kids went home is I would write an email home, and it was just called Dinner Table Topics. And it was like, here's 3 things we talked about today. Ask them this, ask them that, ask them this. And then, you know, talk about this for the week. And it was just super short. And I always told parents, if you're not an email person, you don't want to read it, delete it. Easy to delete. I'm never going to put important information in there. You know, like, hey, your field trip money is due. but it's just something to talk about every night. And I heard back from so many parents that they love that, because kids get in the car at the end of the day and, you know, hey, what'd you do? How was school? Oh, it was great. It was fine. You know, what'd you do? Oh, we just did stuff. We didn't do anything, you know, and really you find out, oh, wow, somebody brought animals into the classroom today. You held a snake. You did this, and you got to go up in front of the class and talk about a PowerPoint. I mean, being able to empower the parents a little bit into what we did see as teachers and what they did do. Your child was a very interesting person today. You know, they weren't just this kid that went off to school, did nothing, and then came back. They had a very interesting day, and they were interesting in it. So here, ask them these questions. So I love just the feedback. And then I would write parents all the time, just one-on-one on, you know, he struggled with this today, or she did great today. After we talked, she did a great job. You know, so I love giving that feedback to parents. As a parent, I always liked getting it. So I try to turn that around.
Well, our feedback comes in two forms. One is, I'll call it a text message at the end of every session. The tutor, here's what we did.
Right.
You know. That's helpful. And then the parent can share that with the classroom teacher in case they're gone down the wrong path. The classroom teacher at the open door of the parent can say, oh, you know, look, we did long division of fractions this week. We're going to do decimals next week.
Right.
Take a look at that, because I suspect if he didn't get this will be the next challenge. Yeah. So that's good. And then all our sessions are recorded.
Right.
So let's say somebody's having trouble with, here again, long division. You know, at minute 17 in the session, we're specifically going through 3 or 4 examples for 5 minutes, you know, how to
showing the steps. And,
so they can go back over it, and the parent can go over it
That's
and
great.
see how the teacher taught it.
Right.
Right. And so if for whatever reason there's not a solid communication, or like maybe accidentally the kid told the tutor, you know, hey, I want to study this because this is on the quiz tomorrow. The quiz maybe didn't go as well because of the material. Instead of, oh, what did you guys work on in tutoring? Didn't you study because you didn't do well on the quiz? Well, the parents now have the option to go back and see exactly what they did. So the communication, I think, is going to be very essential on all aspects. One is from the communication to the student to the tutor, but for the tutor also to the parent, and then of course from the parent to the kid. And so it's a perfect triangle where we can all make sure we're on the same page. As much as I do believe that education has evolved, one area where in-person tutoring does struggle is that level of communication, because parents aren't there over their shoulder the entire time. And not that they will be for online tutoring, but they have some great resources to be able to go back and make sure that the kids are really understanding everything.
Well, you know, you talked about all 3 of us on the same page, the parent, the classroom teacher, the kid. But, you know, the reality of America right now is an awful lot of families are split up. And dad's got them every 2 weeks on the weekend.
Right.
Now, he cares about them too, but he's not the daily custodian. You know, he's good at getting them ice cream and going to the baseball game. And so the dad, whoever's paying for it, can make sure that their surrogates get it. That could be the classroom teacher. That could be the grandparents who are watching them next weekend. But the test is on Monday, and, you know, grandma needs to make sure she goes over this with them. Or, you know, dad or mom that's not the 5-day-a-week custodian of the kid. So that's a benefit of recording these things for everybody.
Yeah. Now, Michelle, I told you I was going to do this, and I have to.
Pressure time.
Michelle is an amazing lifelong learner. And one thing that Ray and Michelle have in common is they have raised lifelong learners. And so Ray has 2 very successful kids that had done pretty amazingly from an academic perspective. And Michelle, I wanted to in particularly talk about you. So Michelle, when she was looking at tutoring options, one thing that she wanted to tutor is ACT, SAT. Now, a lot of adults want to do those things, but they haven't taken the test in quite some time. And so it takes a little bit of training. And so not only do you have to be a good reader, you have to be able to take the test in the format that students will. You have to be able to perform at a very high level. So Tennessee is a ACT state. 99% of the kids take the ACT. And so it's out of 36, and a solid score would be about a 20-21. That's national average. If you're prepared for college, you'll be at an 18 or higher. And so we want our tutors to be at around a 30 to 32. Now that's 90th percentile. So Michelle took the test and came back 45 minutes later. I checked it over, and a lot of adults, very strong readers, will be in the mid-20s, which is a great score. Michelle got a 35, and she only missed one question, and her first question was, well, which one did I miss? And she got it right the second try.
Okay.
So, Michelle, I guess if you wouldn't mind maybe just talking a little bit about maybe some things that, now that you've tutored the ACT, because you had never tutored it previously, like some of the tips and tricks, and maybe why tutoring for a testing that's specific, maybe even like a state test, why it's important to know some of those strategies that maybe you just wouldn't know just from a regular adult perspective.
Right, and that's one of the first things when I get a new student who's coming in to tutor ACT. One thing I'll say, and I typically tutor the English reading grammar, the reading test and then the English grammar test. And the first thing we talk about is that it's nothing like the way we speak in person. It's nothing like the way you tweet. It's nothing like the way you do Instagram messages or text or any of that. That the first question I'll ask them is, do you like to read? How often do you read? When you find the students who are like, oh, I love to read, I'll read anything, they're going to naturally do better because they see the written word as it's going to be reflected on the ACT. But a lot of our kids just aren't. I've got one child my own son, who is a reader, lifelong reader, loves it, always asking me, what book are you reading now? What are you reading? My other son hates to read, absolutely hates to read. So I've kind of gone through both ends of that. But the first thing to really get them to understand is that when coming to tutoring for that, we are going to teach them what ACT is expecting from you. ACT has given these tests forever. I took ACT when I was in high school. So they have tested thousands, hundreds of thousands of kids. They know what they're going to ask, and they know the wrong answer you're probably going to give. They already know all this about you. So let's figure out their strategy in the test. Let's break it apart. If they write it this way, what are they really asking you? And then we go into the strategies. Sometimes it's a matter of teaching them some grammar or reading strategies they just never had, especially when it comes to grammar and sentences writing and things like that. They just somehow didn't catch it, or it went fast when they were in 5th grade and they learned it. So when you teach that, then they get it. But other times it's more of like, just we've got to realize how to break apart, unpack what they're asking you, and then you can answer it. Because it's a very active reading process. And all of us have been in that situation where we're reading something. If you handed me a college level, medical textbook, I could probably read every word in it. Would I understand it? No, not at all. And so you've got to teach them, okay, if you're reading something, let's say you get to the science passage, on the reading test, and there's a lot of things you don't understand, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. They know you don't know those things. Let's look at what they're going to want, main idea, they're going to want this and that. So you it's opening the door to them on unpacking what that test is, really.
Right. Instead
of just, why don't you remember this from 5th grade? You took it, but it's unpacking what they're asking you. So I'm not real sure if I answered that correctly, but really it's what we do when we sit down to tutor, is to get them to understand what this test is. And really convince them, because sometimes they feel like, oh, I did terrible when I took it, and I got a 17 or I got a 16 and I'm no good at reading, and I'm like, no. Reading is a lifelong skill, and you could probably read anything I put in front of you right now. So now let's talk about understanding it and understanding what they're asking you and how to answer that question, because that helps build the confidence. It builds confidence.
What I hear in your answer, Michelle, is that there is both an art and a science to taking the test. There's a set of facts, and they're certainly looking to see what facts you know.
Right.
But the art is in finessing what is it that we're trying to get at.
Yes.
It may not have anything to do with the facts for this question. It may have to do with
the art of communication in that test to the person taking the
which
test.
Which goes to the heart of life, right?
Yes.
The art of communication.
It is. It is. Yeah.
So it's a very useful bifurcation of spheres of intelligence there.
Right.
Facts and understanding.
Right. And I love, after going through that, and then you'll take a little practice test with the student. And again, these are, upper high school, these are teenagers. And they'll take it and you grade it and they're like, wow, I did better than I thought I would. I'm like, you did great. You did a great job, because this is what it's about. You're learning how to unpack it. So.
Right. it's funny, as you were talking about that, I was thinking something you had mentioned earlier about when you were a kid and your parents would take you for a ride, you wanted to know where you were going.
Right.
It's the same thing with this, is okay, so the ACT is going to have a couple of different components. There's going to be a humanities, there's going to be an English, there's going to be a history, maybe a social science, maybe a natural science. So if you know that going into it, there are some students that are maybe more naturally gifted with a natural science. And so if that one is your bread and butter, go for that one first.
Right.
You don't have to do them in any particular
The
order.
little things they need to know. Yeah, you don't have to do that. The little tips.
Well, the other thing about that goes to what we were mentioning earlier about framing expectations. Here's how this is going to go.
Right.
You're going to be in a room with people you don't know. You got to take in number 2 pencils. They're going to hand you the sheet. You fill in the little thing with
that clock is always ticking.
Yeah, and you frame those expectations so that the young person doesn't walk in the room and is shocked because there's people there he or she doesn't know that they forgot their pencil or didn't know, or they're prepared, and that preparedness can go a long way to reducing the anxiety that makes them open to success.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and I think the other side to it is if you see this as a game, and for every game, a lot of these young people will be athletes on some level or do something with music, and understanding, well, there's a strategy to get better at the guitar. You need to learn certain things first. Same with football or whatever that it is there are strategies in place. And so the best part about this, the way I like to explain it to young people, is this is very beatable. And so if you have a strategy going into it, one of my most favorite stories was my first job out of college. I was going to be working in a particular math class, and last minute it changed on me, which was fine. But I had told my admin, I was like, well, I'm not as familiar with this subject. And they said, well, basically, bone up, we still have time, and you'll be surprised at how quickly it comes back to you. Well, that was 100% accurate, and so I always worked a couple months ahead of where we actually were in the curriculum. And it all came back to me, even though I hadn't seen it in a while. So if you get students that are seniors and they're like, well, I haven't seen Algebra 1 since 9th grade, well, it comes back to you very quickly. But, in the ACT for math, for example, you have to be able to recall certain things. So we know what's going to be on it. We know what might be on it, but we know the general landscape of here's what it's going to cover. So from a strategy standpoint, you know what to cover first. But we had a student who he scored, I think he came into it pretty high. He was about a 24, but he wanted to play football at the Naval Academy. And in order to do that, they mapped it out for him. They said, okay, we need your math score. Your other subjects are great, but we need that to be a 28. And this student loved the strategy piece too. And so we said, okay, well, in order to get a 28, you need to get this many correct. Now, here's the best way to do it. Is your first 20, these are very easy problems. They're not trying to trick you. These are very straightforward, one-step problems generally. You need to get all of these right. So you need to get 20 out of 20 here. Now the next 20, so question 21 to 40, these are going to be medium hard style questions. They are trying to trick you. They want you to get maybe a third of these right. But this is where you're going to get the majority of your points. So you want to spend the bulk of your test right here with these 20. Now, questions 41 through 60, these are going to be mainly for your 30s to 36s. So you want to mark C for all of them, get maybe 1 out of 5 right? So you'll get 4 questions right. But that does put a little extra pressure on questions 21 through 40. But if you can get, let's say, 15 of these correct, we're going to show you every little strategy. So underlying, crossing out obvious and wrong answers, plugging in certain things. You'll be amazed at how quickly you can do it. And so he only did, it was a rush test because he had to give the Naval Academy his answer. And so he ended up scoring a 28 on his first try,
awesome.
Down to the T. He got exactly, I think he needed 49 out of 60 correct. He got exactly 49 right. And so, we were so proud of him because he understood this is a game, this is a strategy. The ironic thing is that, so he officially got an offer from the Naval Academy. He turned it down and went somewhere else. But at the same time, getting students to see, yes, going from an 18 to a 30, we've had students do that. That is a huge commitment on your end. But that's where your tutors can really come into place. And if you are committed and this is something that you really want, this can tip the scales from an academic side Because colleges are going to look at really three main things. They're going to look at your GPA, they're going to look at your ACT, and they're going to look at things you do outside of the classroom, whatever that is. So if you can put a third emphasis on this, your GPA when you're a junior or senior, you can't really change that too much. You might be able to take a couple extra honors classes your senior year and do well for a semester. But your spring grades aren't going to matter as much as your fall and your K through 11 at that point. And so the ACT is something you can really invest in, and that's where your scholarship money is also going to come. Would you mind also talking just slightly about that? I mean, your students, so your two boys did very well, and college was not only affordable, they helped you out pretty significantly from a payment standpoint.
Yeah, both of them were able to they went to state college here at MTSU, Middle Tennessee State University, and both were able to come out debt-free on the other side of it because of their scholarships, which I was so thankful for that, because I did not do that when I was in school and came out with a lot of debt, and I think that a lot of students today are doing that, and so they're able to come out without that. But my older son went through public high school there in Williamson County, very good school, and they prepped him very well. He's just an academic kid, loves to read, loves to get in there, takes it as a challenge. Took the ACT several times, and so he did well. My younger one was public schooled up until middle school. When we put him into middle school, he struggled. A very smart child, very, very smart, but just struggled with the structure of it. And with middle school in general, middle school's just a whole beast of its own sometimes, and just couldn't find his niche, couldn't figure out where he fit. He, got along well with all the teachers. He did well, got good grades, but he just was floundering. And my husband and I kind of stepped back and said, okay, do we pull him out and homeschool at this point? We have several friends who homeschool, and so we felt like we had a lot of support if we decided to do that, people who could point us in some directions. And so we did. We pulled him out for high school to homeschool, which a lot of people will say, do not. That's the worst time to pull him out. There's so many things they're going to get to do. He, from 9th grade on, absolutely flourished, and we were able to move as fast as he could move in some of the subjects and slow down in other subjects. And he ended up finishing 4 years of high school in 3 years, along with a couple of dual enrollment courses at the local college, and ended up going into college a year early, and went in with full scholarships and did very, very well. He was one that if I had the knowledge and the thought of how easy it would have been to get ACT tutoring for him, I would have done that, because I incorporated ACT training into his homeschool. And so we were going through the book and things like that. But just what you shared about the strategy of, here's how to take that test apart. Here's what this is, and here's what this is, and here's what this is. To me, at that point, that was before I was tutoring, it was just a big test. It's just a big, scary test. And there's no rhyme or reason to it. And there really is a lot of rhyme and reason to it. And so I probably would have taken advantage of that at the time. We did get his score up, through just a lot of study. But I think having that aspect of it, of somebody to break it apart who was a lot more familiar with it, that would have helped him, get a higher score earlier, instead of kept trudging through and taking it again and taking it again. But it really is just finding where your child is, what communicates best with your child. And for my younger son, it was not public high school, and but pulling him out to homeschool and being involved in other things, he just flourished, and so we were very happy with that decision.
Something you said about homeschooling made me think that's another open door for tutoring, because you said you had some resources, I guess, in your community or friend network that could be helpful, but maybe none of those people knows trigonometry.
Right,
maybe
exactly
none of those people knows calculus or world geography.
Right.
So it can be that homeschooling environment's perfect for this child.
Yes.
But mom and dad don't know anything about
exactly
this.
Right. Once you start hitting middle school math, it becomes a little more of a struggle.
Yeah. For me, for sure. So tutoring becomes an option in that environment, because maybe nobody in the neighborhood can teach this. And so, there we are with people like yourself who've been a classroom certified teacher who actually know how to communicate this content to a child. It's just another resource, another way to use tutoring. Right,
especially one-on-one. I mean, like we do with online, just to get out, no matter where you are, you know, where you live, what state you're in, that you can jump online, they can have the same tutor that they had, you know, it's just a regular teacher that they see that pops in and gives them their math lesson or gives them their science lesson or helps them with reading or whatever they need.
Well, and because they're certified background check, classroom experienced, what we find is that they understand this child, they communicate one-on-one, and they're not in a group of 30 kids.
That's
Because,
huge.
you know, when you're in front of the class or any group,
Right.
Susie or Johnny over here, third row over, you know, they're glazing over.
Right.
And you can't do anything about it as a classroom teacher.
Right.
But as the one-on-one, of course, that's all you're there for is Johnny or Susie or whoever.
Right. Yeah, I mean, one thing we were also talking about is how do we foster a love of learning, and always encouraging students to ask those why questions. And we go back to homeschooling, is there's, I think one of the easier ways to create lifelong learners is to get in the trenches with them, especially early on. And Michelle, if you could maybe talk about from your experience inside of the classroom of why the early grades are so foundational for not only creating lifelong learners, but lifelong readers, and how those early grades, maybe K through 4th, really set them up for the next 8 years.
They do. I think just from what I've seen in classroom teaching and then going into tutoring for older grades too, is if you take any child, you know, that's out public school, and sometimes even homeschool, but by the time they're hitting maybe 11 or 12 years old, they'll tell you, I'm a math person, or I'm a reading person, or I'm an art person, or I'm a music person. And so they know even by that point kind of what they like to do, what comes easy to them. And homeschooling really lets us grab onto that and run with it, because it's a natural gift. If they're naturally gifted in math, we want to find that and help. You know, don't just think, oh, they're good in math, we don't have to worry about math. No, you want to take that even further. You want to keep, you know, expounding upon that. If they're, you know, they love to read, then read as much as you can. The drawback on that, what I also saw kind of with first and second graders, is that a lot of parents, oh, well, he's a good reader, he knows how to read, let's jump him into Harry Potter books. No, they're not ready for, there's a whole thematic concept there that they're not ready for. Let's bring them back, you know, and get them some challenging reading, but on their level, something age appropriate, developmentally appropriate, but just keep giving them things. It's almost like if someone, you know, loves a certain food or whatever, you know, as a wife or whatever, I'm gonna try to get my husband the food that he likes. You know, you wanna feed someone what they like. So if they like math, you wanna feed them math. If they like science, feed them science. And homeschooling really opens up to that, because you can go on field trips, you can go, you know, we talked earlier, if you've got a child who is, you know, by the time they're in 4th, 5th grade, they love everything to do with doctors and medicine, and they love medical shows, and they're reading about doctors. And you know, if you've got a friend who's a doctor, ask if they can shadow. There's so much that opens the door on homeschooling that you can do. And then, like you said, you're in the trenches learning right there with them. You're going with them. If they see you excited about learning as a parent, then they're going to be excited about it too. And with tutoring, if I come across a question that I'm like, wow, okay, I don't remember how to do this math question, let's look it up. You know, you get your phone, you Google it, you're learning right there with them. Okay, here's how we're gonna solve it. Here's how we're gonna do it. So let's do this one together, and then you try that one. And if they can see that you as the parent or the teacher or the tutor is just as invested as they are in learning this and in taking it further and asking why. As a tutor, I'll sit there a lot of times and think, well, why do you think they said that? Why do you think this happened? Why do you think they're asking you that? You know, then it kind of gives them a little more ownership of it. Of what they like to do. And by the time they get to about 10 years old, they're becoming these intricate little humans, you know, that have their own likes and interests and abilities. And to be able to give them some ownership in there, I think is another thing that homeschooling does as well to that.
Absolutely. And so one thing that we'd like to do on the podcast is look at a headline in education. And so for this week, or for this episode, it's there's an estimate that came out for the 2025 school year that somewhere between 3.5 and 3.7 million students will be homeschooled for this upcoming school year. And so, of course, that those numbers change, because you can start off with homeschooling and it's not a good fit, so they go to public school, or you're in public school and something happens and you want to homeschool. But still, that's one of the most that it's ever been, even with COVID. And so I think a lot of parents are seeing that. One of the areas that we have seen as a reason for homeschooling is, we were talking earlier in the podcast about pressure. And so, I'd love to hear your opinion on some of these state testings. So in Tennessee in particular, students are taking state testings earlier and earlier. There's been talks about doing it as early as first grade, but now they officially take it in second grade. It doesn't count necessarily, but it really starts to count in third and fourth grade. And so, and there's pretty serious ramifications that if you don't pass, you might not be able to move on, or there's certain things that you have to do, and then there's even a fourth grade rule. So yeah, I just would love to hear about that from a teacher perspective. And we talk about not creating a tense atmosphere at home when you're learning something, but now we're creating tense atmospheres for teachers, and that's not probably the best environment for students to be learning in either.
Yeah, and it is. I mean, you're looking at a third grader, so someone who's 8 years old, going in to take a test that's going to take a week, to take every day these long tests, and these are 8-year-olds. It's hard to even sit still for 20 minutes, much less to take a test for 35 and not talk and not look up. And it is to where it's almost like what is said, to the students is, don't worry about it. There's no pressure. We just want to see how well you do. We just want to see, it's just another test. Just go take this test. But the teachers feel differently. The parents feel differently. Administration feels differently. Their older brothers and sisters are telling them differently, and they're being told, like you said, with fourth grade, third and fourth grade, if you don't hit a certain benchmark, you might have to take reading during the summer. You might have to go to summer school, or you might have to stay back a grade. And these 8-year-olds are internalizing all of that. There's more anxiety in students today. I don't have any stats. I didn't think to look it up, but just from a teacher standpoint, I had more children than I would ever have imagined in public elementary school who were going to therapy for anxiety. And this was like 9 and 10-year-olds, and they had a therapy appointment every week or whatever. And they just, to me, I'm like, they're children. They're children. They should go be playing. I do, though, on the other hand, as being a teacher and being a parent, I do think benchmarks are important. I think we need to see, at this point, before we move into a higher math, are they able to do this math? Before we move into higher reading, are they able to unpackage a book, to know what's going on? So I do believe that we do need to test throughout to see, are they meeting this benchmark before we move into something bigger and set them up for failure. We don't want to do that. We want to set them up for success. So I think there's just got to be this fine line in there somewhere of that. And the public school system is, it's not only the big test at the end of the year. There are often a quarterly benchmark that comes in that, the kids know it's important. It's going to be, even in fourth grade, you're going to be tested on everything we learned in the last 9 weeks. And that happens every time. And they're like, oh, are we getting ready to take the benchmark? I'll let you know when we are. I just try to get them to not worry about it. Because, I mean, we all know when we get stressed and anxious about something, we're not going to perform as well as adults. And so kids are the same way. Kids are worried the teacher's going to be mad at them if they don't do well. Their parents are definitely going to be mad at them if they don't do well. They might fail. They might, the gossip within the schoolroom is, they don't want to be the one that didn't make it, So there is a lot of that. And I think that for those that are able to maybe look into homeschooling as an option, it's such a priceless gift to be able to give your child confidence instead of anxiety. That we'll tackle this when we need to tackle it, and you're going to do what you can do, and we're great.
Yeah, that's good.
Right, yeah. I mean, I would say that on the other side too is, I think in general, teachers are very undervalued, especially in the United States. Salary, of course, is one thing, but just how they're pressured internally, like inside the classroom with the administration, but then also from the parents. I've had a number of colleagues that have won awards within Best Teacher in their county. One was nominated for Best Teacher in their state. And then being a young person, 28, 30 years old, and they left education entirely. And so not being able to keep tenured, high-quality teachers is a major problem. And so we're getting younger, inexperienced teachers that will probably one day make great educators. And I'm not saying that they're not there now, but if we're weeding out the great teachers for younger, inexperienced versions of themselves, I think we're doing our students a disservice. And so, hopefully that's something that changes, and that we can, keep high talented teachers. But yeah, I mean, I think all of that is really important. And I think that control piece too, where if parents are, let's say, are frustrated with math for their kids because now they're learning, in Tennessee we use Common Core, and that's not how a lot of parents were taught math. And so at the end of the day, if 8 times 2 is 16, doesn't matter if you use a Common Core method or some other method. And so parents are frustrated, and they again feel that pressure from the students. And so homeschool allows you to, okay, well, maybe some of these math facts, we really want to hammer these down before we move on. But also, here's how I taught it, here's how you might, or was taught it, here's how you might see it if you were to ever go back to public school. And it's much more of a learning together, where sometimes parents will see it to their kids as like, well, I know everything and I'm the parent. Of course, they don't mean to do that, but that's how students can sometimes see their parents. But if you were learning it together, it's like, oh, mom and dad, they don't know this, but they're able to gain it through these methods. Maybe I can do that too. And we give kids confidence along the way. I think that can really go far. Well, good. And then one thing in the podcast too, we also like to have a motivational quote on some level, linking education. So, Michelle, I would love to talk about the quote that you said, and then I want you to maybe read your follow-up. I thought your follow-up was very fantastic. Now, this one has a unknown author, but the quote is, "Teaching is the one profession that creates all other professions." And again, if you wouldn't mind just reading your follow-up.
So the quote, I kind of wrote a little paragraph to Josh. I am very wordy, just about why I like that quote so much, because it doesn't have an author. We don't know who it is, so we can't really say where it came from, but it just hits my heart. But yes, teaching is the one profession that creates all other professions. So what I then sent to Josh was, I know nothing about medicine, but some of my students will be surgeons. I know nothing about mechanical engineering, but some of my students will be engineers. And it's our job as teachers or tutors to build the confidence and feed the curiosity and help students realize any question is a great question. And if we can do that, then we open the door to anything. And that keeps me so humble, honestly. If my students can someday far surpass anything that I do, that means I've succeeded. And they may be a surgeon, they may be working on the rocket that goes to Mars, things that I could never imagine doing. But everybody starts at 5 years old. Everybody starts at 5 years old. Everybody learns to read. Everybody learns to do math. And so if we as teachers can help with that, then it's very humbling.
Absolutely. And so we were joking ahead of time. We used to have a couple of interns that worked for us, and these would be 16, 17, 18-year-old, very intelligent tutors. And we would joke about, well, what do we look for in interns? Well, we look for people that we couldn't work for in 10 years. Yeah. And there was someone who recently got accepted into a PhD program at MIT. And I jokingly sent her a text. I was like, well, you did it in 4 years. A big congratulations. Now, of course, she didn't actually tutor with us or teach with us, but I was thinking about her teachers, a lot of them who I knew personally. And okay, well, they taught her history. And just thinking about who these students are, and there's so much potential, and we can speak life while gaining them skills that will not only pay off today, but it builds a future for tomorrow. And so, yeah, all of that is really great. Ray, is there anything that you would want to say?
Well, I'm thrilled to be in any conversation that addresses itself to helping kids be more. And this was a great one. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, Michelle, thank you so much for coming in. Thank you for your time. We gained a lot of valuable insight from the teacher's perspective, and we really appreciate you.
Oh, thank you for letting me come in. I mean, and I think it all comes down to just, you talked about for a minute about all these teachers get into the profession and then they leave, and it's like, why do we get in? It's because we like kids. We want to teach. We love teaching. We love that creative, that aha moment, when all of a sudden they can do something and walk out with confidence. And so anything that I could talk all day about that. I just love it.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to be having a YouTube short coming out in the next few days regarding summer learning loss, which is very real across the board, but I would say foundationally K through 5. And then the topic for next week on our podcast is we'll be talking to a retired teacher who works with a local college as an adjunct professor, and we'll be talking to him about American education from a teacher's perspective, from the college level, but also some things that adults can do as soon as they graduate from high school. outside of college. So please be sure to tune in for that. Thank you for your time. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to hearing from you soon.